He awoke to silence. Not the kind that follows a lullaby or a prayer, but the kind that presses against the bones. Heavy, endless, absolute. When his eyes opened, they found no sky he could name. It was not day, not night, not twilight. It was something in between, a hushed expanse where the heavens wore the color of waiting. Beneath him, sand stretched like a sea that had forgotten its waters. Each grain seemed touched by a faint inner glow, as though the desert itself remembered light, even when the sun had abandoned it. He lay still, his body unsure if it belonged to this place. His name did not return when he searched for it. His past was like a page dissolved in water. All he knew was breath, and even that seemed borrowed. The silence carried something. Not emptiness, not absence, but a pulse. A low vibration, faint as the echo of a distant bell. It stirred him, coaxed him to rise. His legs trembled as though they had not been used for centuries, yet they obeyed. When he stood, the horizon shifted like a mirage, a line trembling with heat that was not heat, with light that was not light. He began to walk. The sand yielded without resistance, each step leaving no trace. As he moved, he realized he was not guided by choice, but by that sound, that distant call, steady, patient, insistent. Somewhere ahead, something awaited. Hours, or what felt like hours, folded into one another. Time here was untrustworthy, as if it had been left behind with his forgotten name. Yet the journey was not barren. He noticed subtle wonders. A dune that shimmered like glass when he passed it. A wind that whispered words in no tongue he knew, but that his heart almost understood. A brief flicker of shadow crossing his path, though there were no clouds, no birds, nothing above. He felt a pang of fear, but beneath it wonder. At last he saw her, a child. She was small, no older than 7 perhaps, seated upon a dune, playing with objects that clinked faintly in her lap. When he drew closer, he saw they were keys, dozens of them, each unlike the other, some ancient and rusted, others made of crystal, one carved from bone, another of pure light. She held them as though they were toys, and yet her posture carried the stillness of eternity. When she looked at him, her eyes were not childish. They were deep, like wells that had never known a bottom. "You'll need one of these," she said simply. Her voice rang clear, unbroken by the vast silence. He opened his mouth to ask, "A key for what?" But no sound came. His throat was sand, his tongue stone. She only smiled, as though she had heard him anyway. "You don't get to choose," she whispered, and without hesitation, placed a key of iron into his palm. It was heavy, far heavier than it looked, as though it carried not just metal but memory. Before he could speak again, she turned away, and both she and the keys dissolved into the desert air, like breath vanishing on a cold morning. He was left alone, the weight of the key burning his hand. He walked on. The desert seemed altered now, less desolate, more alive. He noticed faint structures at the edge of vision, towers that flickered and vanished when he tried to focus, arches made of light trembling like mirages. His steps grew quicker. The sound, the distant bell, beat stronger now. And then he saw him, an old man, sat upon a rock, though the desert had offered no stones until now. His eyes were closed, his face carved by lines not only of age but of storms endured. In his lap, he held a staff, though he did not lean on it. The traveler approached carefully. The old man spoke before he was addressed. "I see you," he said, though his eyelids never lifted. His voice was calm, like water poured from one vessel into another. "And yet I do not. I see the path you walk, but not the feet that touch it. I see the city that awaits you, but not the hands that will build it." The traveler wanted to protest, to ask where he was, who he was, but again his voice would not rise. You have no words yet, the old man continued gently. That is good. Words can be cages. Silence is a truer companion in the beginning. He raised a finger, tracing shapes in the air. The traveler watched as invisible lines shimmered briefly, like constellations unseen in ordinary skies. You will wonder, the old man said, if you are dreaming. You are not. You will wonder if you are alive or dead. You are both. You will wonder if you are alone. You are never alone. A pause. Go. The city calls. Do not fear what you will see in its mirrors. The staff tapped once upon the ground. The sound was like thunder, though it was only a whisper. And when the traveler blinked, the old man was gone, as though he had never been. But the faint glow of a path stretched before him now, like a river of starlight woven through the sand. The bell call swelled louder, drawing him forward. He felt the weight of the iron key in his hand, and for the first time, something within him shifted. Not memory, not yet, but the echo of belonging. He walked on, the desert watching, the sky waiting. He followed the river of starlight. It didn't flow like water. It held its place as though time itself had settled into the sand, a luminous seam sewn into the world. Each step landed where the faint glow was strongest, and when he paused, the light ahead pulsed once, as if to say, "Continue." The bell call he had heard since waking grew clearer, less like metal and more like breath drawn through a hollow reed. It came from no direction he could point to, and yet it felt ahead of him, soft, patient, unafraid of his slowness. He tested his voice again. Nothing. The silence within him matched the silence around him, but neither was empty now. The key in his palm warmed and cooled in subtle rhythms, not painful, only present, like a heartbeat remembering itself. The dunes changed. They were still dunes, but their edges softened into ripples that gleamed for a second longer than light should allow. The sky, still that color of waiting, thinned to reveal faint strata, as if multiple skies lay one behind the other, transparent pages in a book turned by a wind he could not feel. He noticed marks along the path, nothing he could name. Not footprints, not symbols. Pressures in the sand that suggested something had once knelt there and listened very closely to the ground. He did the same. At first, he heard only the small hush of his breath. Then, almost painfully far away, he heard water, no stream, no river, but the memory of water. It struck him that the desert remembered everything it had ever been. The seasons it had been rain, the valleys it had been shade, even the voices that had rested, wept, prayed across it. He lifted his head and kept going. A dark shape rose ahead, not a dune, not a hill. As he drew closer, he saw it was a low wall of black stone, half buried, the top of an old archway swallowed by sand. The arch had no door, no hinges, no visible lock. Only a seam where stone met stone, a seam too fine for a blade of grass. The key grew heavy. He stood before the arch and waited. The waiting was longer than he expected, longer than any good story would have allowed, and still he waited. When he raised the iron to the seam, expecting rejection, the metal hummed once, quiet as a moth's wing. The stone took on the faintest tremor, but the arch did not open. He lowered the key. He breathed. A thought crossed him like shade. Not everything that looks like a door is meant to be opened yet. The bell call did not change, did not move away in disappointment. If anything, it sounded nearer. He slipped the key into the fold of his palm and pressed on. Now the desert offered a mercy, a basin ahead, a shallow depression where the sand was darker and smooth, like a bowl carved by ancient hands. At its center lay water, still as uncut glass. He would have missed it if not for the way the light starlit path tightened into a thread that ended at the basin's edge. He knelt. The water held no sky, no reflection of him. Instead, it held a city. Not perfectly, more like a memory of a city. Towers seemed to rise beneath the surface, not bending as water bends, but standing in their own right, shimmering like ideas made visible. He leaned over, expecting his shadow to trouble the view. It did not. The city remained, unaffected, a quiet architecture beneath. The key pulsed once in his hand. He dipped the iron tip into the water. No ripple, no sound, but a tone, yes, a tone very fine, threaded upward through his arm and into his chest, and with it, the first word since waking slipped out, fragile and entire. "I." He stopped, startled. The desert took the sound and did not throw it back. A second attempt rose like a bird testing its wings. "I am." No name came. No old syllable to anchor him to a past he had not yet earned. So he let the sentence end there, unfinished but alive. He found he was not ashamed of the incompleteness. He cupped water and brought it to his lips. It tasted like nothing. It tasted like air. But something unclenched inside him, a knot loosening, and the bell call braided with the tone he had felt. 2 threads now, not one. When he stood, a figure waited across the basin, one he could have sworn had not been there a breath ago. She wore no color he could name. A veil veiled nothing. It was sewn of the same nearly sky that had followed him since he woke. She was neither young nor old, neither tall nor small. The words threshold and measure came and stood quietly beside her, unwilling to claim too much. He did not know if she would speak, but she did not need to. She raised her right hand and held it at the height of her heart. He felt his own body mirror her without consent. His hand rose to his chest, key pressed between his palm and bone. "Listen," she said, and the word did not cross the air. It landed inside him, a seed placed in soil that had finally softened. He listened, nothing at first. Then, a soft enumeration, not in numbers, but in breaths. All the breaths he had ever taken, all the breaths he had lost, all the breaths he had stolen from himself by hurrying where patience had been asked. The count did not shame him. It simply included him, as if the act of counting were a way of bringing him back to himself. The figure nodded once, not to him, but to the basin, as though acknowledging a witness. She lowered her hand. He lowered his. The city beneath the water did not vanish. It sharpened. "Not every door opens from the outside," she said. Or perhaps it was the desert, or the water, or the bell call, or the place in him that had begun to trust. "Keep the key. You will know." He blinked. The veil was only air again. He crossed the basin along a narrow lip of stone he had not seen, then followed the starlit path as it gathered itself into a clearer road. The sand on either side kept its silence, but it was a living silence, not the one he had woken into. He wondered at the old man's words, "the city that awaits you," but not the hands that will build it, and felt a question open. Who builds what I will inhabit? Ahead, the air thickened, not as fog does, but as meaning does when it is about to arrive. The bell call aligned with his steps. His footfalls found a rhythm that was not marching and not drifting. He began to suspect that the path's light and the bell's pulse were not guides so much as agreements. He was being met. Shadows gathered, not ominous, only present. Moths rose from the sand in a slow spiral. They were pale, nearly transparent, their wings lettered with markings he could not read and yet almost recognized. One settled on the back of his hand. Another rested on the key. A third hovered an inch from his throat, precisely where sound had first refused and then allowed him. For a moment, they arranged themselves into a pattern that made a doorway in the air. Not a door, not even a frame, simply the shape through which a person could pass. When he stepped forward, they folded around him and then dispersed, not startled, not startled at all, as if this had been the entire point of their gathering. He remembered nothing. He remembered everything he did not remember. The feeling was not confusion. It was expectancy. The path bent, then straightened. A low wind. He had not felt wind since waking. Moved across the desert. It stirred the surface just enough to write brief sentences that completed themselves as soon as they began. He thought he caught the word mercy. He could not be sure. The horizon lifted. He did not notice the lifting at first. Horizons usually do not rise to meet us. But this one did, subtly, as if bringing something into view that did not belong to the old rules of distance. The night sky softened, and a line of brightness drew itself where Earth would have ended if the world were smaller. He stopped. The bell call went quiet, though it did not end. It seemed to stand beside him and look as well. There, far, far beyond what the desert should allow, the faintest geometry made itself known. Angles too true to be rock, verticals too patient to be sand. Not an illusion, not a promise, a presence. He did not say city. He did not dare to call it by name, not yet given. But the water had already told him what to expect. He took a breath, and another, and was surprised to find both breaths meet him halfway, like old friends who had waited in a place not reached by sorrow. Without meaning to, he whispered, "I am listening." The phrase did not try to become more than it was. It did not reach for a name. It did not apologize for its smallness. It stood upright inside him and faced the bright line across the horizon. Something beyond the line leaned toward him in equal measure. He walked again. The road of starlight hardened, not into stone, not into metal, but into certainty. Each step had weight and answer. The key cooled and warmed, not following his hand, not following the air, but attending to a measure he could not hear yet. He passed another arch, mostly swallowed. This time he did not stop. He did not test the seam. The lesson had already been given. Some thresholds are recognized, not forced. As he moved on, a hairline crack traveled up the buried stone of its own accord. A fracture that made no sound and knit itself closed as soon as it had finished, like a sigh that leaves and returns. The desert offered one more sign before yielding to distance. A field of very small stones, scattered as if by a careful hand. He thought at first they were merely stones. Then he saw each bore a soft concavity, the memory of a thumb pressed long ago. He touched one. It was warm. It would have been easy to fill his pockets, to carry proof forward. He did not. The proof had never been in the carrying. He left the field as he had found it and felt something like gratitude cross his chest and continue on ahead of him, scouting where gratitude always does, into the place where recognition will be needed. Light changed. The waiting color sky allowed the smallest seam of blue, so thin it could have been a kindness rather than a pigment. The bell call did not resume, or rather, it resumed in him. He did not hear it now. He carried it. And because you're listening now, you may recognize this, that there are moments when the world does not grow brighter, and yet something in you knows where brightness is. He did not hurry. He did not slow. He matched what called him step for step. By the time the horizon's line resolved into edges, the suggestion of gates, the suspicion of windows, the day had not arrived, the night had not returned, and time remembered that it was only a way of keeping track of love's patience. He closed his fingers around the key, not to hide it, not to claim it, only to acknowledge it. The iron warmed once, a small ascent. Ahead, the first outlying shapes of the city waited at a distance that did not belong to maps. He did not enter them. Not yet. The desert wished a last quiet upon his shoulders, and he received it. The basin's water lay far behind, but the image it had given him stood where it had always stood, which is to say, within reach. He lifted his eyes to the almost sky, and for a heartbeat, The layers parted like curtains drawn open just enough to remind a house why it has windows. He kept walking toward the place where memory would have walls and windows and streets, toward the place that would ask him for nothing he did not already carry, toward the city that was not outside of him and not inside either, but precisely where the two had always met without his noticing. And the sand, remembering rain, did not cling to his feet. It stepped aside. It let him pass. The desert had not ended, but it had changed. The silence was no longer the silence of absence, but the silence of breath held before a word is spoken. Each grain of sand seemed to wait, shimmering with a memory of sound, as though the whole land listened for what he might become. The traveler walked, and in walking he discovered that the desert walked with him. The dunes did not shift behind his back. They leaned forward, attending, like an audience without eyes. He touched the key again. It answered with its small pulse of warmth, steady and patient, as if it knew more of the road than he did. The starlit path led him to a circle of stones, no higher than his knees. They looked ordinary until he noticed that their shadows reached inward, stretching toward one another though the half-sky above offered no light to cast them. When he stepped into the circle, the air thickened and he felt a presence take form, not of sand or sky, but of boundary itself. A figure rose, neither holy light nor holy dusk, veiled and overlapping both. "You carry the key," she said, and her voice was not sound but recognition of sound, like remembering a melody before hearing it. He wanted to answer, but his voice came as fragments, fragile as wings. Will," he whispered, though he did not know to what he had agreed. She inclined her head as though it were enough. "Beyond this desert lies the first of many rooms. You will not enter as a stranger. You will see yourself, and what you see will not always welcome you. Do not turn away. What resists is also part of your house." Then the shadows dissolved, and the figure with them. Only the stones remained, plain as they had been before. He left the circle, carrying the echo of her words in place of certainty. As he pressed forward, the sand thinned, giving way to a pale bedrock that rang faintly underfoot. Each step released a tone into the ground, and he realized the desert had been singing all along, only too deep for his ears until now. His footsteps joined the hidden song, not perfectly, but enough to align him with something larger. The question rose whether every traveler heard the same melody or whether each received their own. The thought did not ache for an answer. It rested in him like a stone in the palm, weight, not burden. A wind lifted, carrying with it wings, shapes like birds, though without feathers, without names. They glimmered as they moved, scattering prisms into the half-light. One walked beside him, wingtips brushing the air as if it knew his pace. He turned and felt its faceless presence watching, not judging, not measuring, only accompanying. His chest softened. Perhaps I have never truly been alone, not even in my forgetting. The winged shape lingered until the horizon stirred again, then rose without haste and dissolved into the upper layers of sky. Far ahead, the dunes flattened, and the horizon shifted into something more certain. Through the fabric of distance, he glimpsed angles too deliberate to be natural, arches and towers shimmering between mirage and fact. His chest tightened, not in fear but recognition. The basin's waters had whispered of it, and his bones now confirmed what his eyes barely held. The city of memories awaited. It did not call, it did not beckon. It simply was like truth, abiding until one is ready to see it. Between him and that presence lay a canyon, jagged and deep, the desert broken open as if by an ancient strike. He stood at the edge, feeling the weight of distance. The bell call returned, but not from the horizon. It rose from within, aligned with his heartbeat. He closed his eyes and pressed the key against his chest. The canyon did not close, the walls did not bend, but a thread of light unfolded beneath him, narrow as breath, strong as eternity. He stepped forward. Eyes still closed, he crossed. The thread did not tremble. When he opened them halfway across, he saw the desert stretching behind him like a chapter folded, not erased. Ahead, the outlines of the city sharpened, towers glinting with inner fire, arches vast enough to hold both sorrow and joy. By the time he reached the other side, the thread dissolved as if it had never been, but the certainty remained. He had not crossed by power, but by trust. The ground was firmer now. The bell call fell silent outside, but burned steady within. He looked once more at the horizon. The city did not move, did not change, but its silence had shifted. It was no longer foreign. It was an acknowledgement. He placed the key back into his palm and whispered, not command, not question, but recognition. Here. The word was small, but the desert received it without echo, without refusal, only acceptance. He took another step, and then another, toward the waiting light where memory would take shape as walls and streets, toward the place that was not outside and not inside, but the meeting ground of both. And the sand, remembering rain, stepped aside to let him pass. The horizon ceased to be horizon. What had been suggestion became presence, and what had been mirage became substance. The city of memories rose before him, neither sudden nor gradual, but with the inevitability of dawn. Its towers were not built of stone or steel, but of something transparent and living, as if glass had learned to breathe. Each tower glimmered with inner fire, not steady but pulsing, and in those pulses he recognized something both intimate and universal, fragments of life, moments carried forward. He stood at its threshold, though no wall encircled it. The desert ended as if it had reached its purpose, and the ground became clear like polished crystal, holding the weight of his steps without echo. He waited, expecting gates, guards, barriers. None appeared. The city did not hide itself. It did not test him with locks or riddles. Its openness was its gravity. He entered not by permission, but by recognition. Inside, the air was different, lighter, but not thinner. It carried a fragrance not of flowers, but of remembrance itself, that peculiar scent the heart knows when it recalls love long absent. He breathed it, and something within him aligned, as if his lungs had found the shape they were made for. He took his first steps into the streets. They were wide, yet without measure. Their lines curved like veins in a living body, flowing toward unseen centers. Each street shimmered faintly, as though light rose from beneath, not above. He looked into the surface and saw movement, reflections but not his own. Faces, gestures, fragments of laughter, tears, voices. They appeared and vanished like waves returning to the sea. He realized the streets were not built from stone, but from memory itself, crystallized into paths. He followed one until it widened into a river. It was not water, not entirely, but liquid enough to move, glinting with currents of silver and gold. The river carried images in its flow, a child learning to walk, a soldier laying down arms, a mother holding a newborn, a stranger offering bread, two hands parting in farewell, a kiss given, a word withheld. Each image lasted only a breath before dissolving into the current, but the impression lingered in him as if he had lived each one. He leaned closer. In the river, he saw not only moments of others, but echoes of something that might have been his. A glance familiar, a gesture half-remembered, a sorrow that pressed faintly against the chest. He could not name them, but he knew their weight. The key pulsed in his hand. He moved on, drawn by a sound gentler than the bell of the desert. It was the sound of flowing, of continuity, of stories told without words. The riverbank rose into gardens. At first he thought them ordinary, rows of flowers, trees bending in quiet breeze. But as he drew near, he saw that each flower glowed faintly, its light steady, its petals translucent as glass. He knelt to examine one, and when his breath passed over it, the flower opened to reveal an image within. It was small, simple, a man stooping to lift a fallen bird and place it back upon a branch. The act carried no name, no face, no reward. Yet the flower bloomed brighter as though such gestures nourished its roots. He touched another, a young woman sitting beside a sick neighbor through the night, holding a cup of water steady in her hands. Another, a child giving half a piece of bread to a stranger. Every flower held such moments, gestures of love and kindness, so small they might have gone unnoticed in the world. But here they endured, blossoming into forms of light. He walked further and saw that the gardens stretched vast, each bloom a testament. Some flowers shone brighter than the stars he no longer remembered. Others were faint, fragile, as if nearly forgotten. He felt awe, but also a pang. How many gestures in his own life had gone unmade, left seedless, never blossomed into this eternal field? He reached for one dim flower, its petals nearly closed. When his hand hovered above it, he saw within the image of a child sitting alone in the dark, waiting for someone who never came. The flower dimmed further. He withdrew his hand, shame pricking him, though he did not know whose absence it was. The path turned, and the gardens gave way to rows of houses. They were not grand, plain structures of stone, some luminous, others dim. He walked among them and understood. These were dwellings built of memory. The brighter houses were filled with warmth, light pouring from windows. The darker stood empty, their stones heavy, their doors sealed. He paused at one that seemed abandoned. Its walls were gray, not with age, but with neglect. When he touched its surface, it crumbled slightly under his fingers. A sensation ran through him, not memory, but the ache of forgetting, of something once lived but denied. He stepped back uneasy. The street was lined with hundreds such houses, some radiant, some hollow. The city did not explain. It simply offered itself, waiting for his recognition. As he moved deeper, the streets led him to a square. At its center stood a figure, not veiled, not hidden, but serene, luminous without blinding. He wore no crown, no robe, only a cloak of plain fabric that shimmered faintly, as if woven from dust and dawn. His face carried no features the traveler could cling to, yet he knew him instantly, the way one recognizes a voice long before the name arrives. The figure greeted him without gesture, without speech. The air itself seemed to carry the words, "Every choice is architecture." The sentence unfolded not as teaching, but as revelation. The streets, the rivers, the gardens, the houses, all testified to the truth of it. Every act, every silence, every moment built something here. Nothing was lost. Nothing was wasted. What the world thought fleeting had weight. What seemed small had permanence. The traveler lowered his eyes, overcome. The key burned faintly in his palm. He understood, dimly, that it was not merely for opening doors, it was also for building them. The figure did not speak again. He only raised his hand slightly, and the square brightened, as if acknowledging the lesson had been received. Then he turned and walked into a side street, disappearing as if he had merged with the city itself. The traveler remained standing in the square. Around him, the city of memories glowed. Each tower beat like a heart. Each garden breathed. Each river sang. And he felt himself part of its structure, not visitor, not intruder, but citizen in waiting. He whispered into the air, not sure if it was prayer or confession. "What have I built?" The city did not answer, but the silence it offered was not empty. It was an invitation. He stood still, listening. The silence of the square lingered long after the figure had gone. It was not a silence of absence, but of presence, like the pause a teacher allows so the student may feel the weight of a lesson. The traveler remained there, breathing with the city, until his own heart began to echo its rhythm. When at last he moved, the streets guided him as rivers do, without force but with suggestion. He followed curves and angles that seemed to anticipate him, turning where the light swelled brighter, pausing where the stones deepened in tone. He realized the city was not fixed. Its paths adjusted subtly to his steps, not bending like illusions, but adapting like a living host arranging itself around a guest. The key in his hand pulsed again, steady as breath. He no longer wondered whether it was meant for one door or many. It seemed less an object than an agreement, a promise that thresholds existed, and that in time he would recognize them. The street opened into another garden, this one wider than the last, enclosed by walls of transparent stone that shimmered like frozen waterfalls. At its center stood a pool, but unlike the basin in the desert, this water did not conceal a city. It revealed lives. The surface rippled with moments too intimate for strangers to know. The soft brushing of a mother's hand against her child's hair, the trembling of fingers tying a letter never sent, the stillness of two people sharing silence with more comfort than words could give. The traveler knelt and watched, his chest tightening with emotions he could not name. These were not grand victories, not miracles sung in history. They were small fidelities, private and nearly invisible in the world. And yet here they were radiant, more enduring than marble, more enduring than flame. He leaned closer, and for an instant he saw himself, an echo of a moment, perhaps belonging to someone he had once been. A hand reaching out, hesitating, then drawing back. The image dissolved before he could grasp it, leaving only the ache of unfinished love. He touched the water, but it did not change. The city kept its record without judgment, without commentary. A voice spoke behind him, quiet, as though it had always been there. Not all gestures are completed. Some remain seeds. Even seeds have weight. The traveler turned. The guide had returned. He looked no different than before. Plain cloak, face without detail, luminous without blaze. But now his eyes, or what passed for eyes, carried warmth like a hearth that does not seek attention but gives it freely. The traveler wanted to answer, to ask. His voice still came halting, but enough. "Seeds, do they grow here?" The guide inclined his head. Everything grows somewhere. The question is not whether, but how. Some blossoms open in fields, some in souls, some in silence. What you withhold still builds, but what you give builds differently. Every choice is architecture. The words settled into the traveler's chest with the gravity of truth. He lowered his eyes, ashamed of the gesture he had glimpsed, his own hesitation, his failure to give. But the guide did not rebuke him. Instead, he touched the edge of the pool with one hand, and the surface expanded outward like breath. The image of the withheld hand returned, but this time it transformed, branching into possibilities. If it had reached, if it had remained, if it had found courage. Each possibility shone, then folded gently back into the water. "Do not fear what you have not built," the guide said. The city records both walls and windows. Even absence leaves its trace. What matters is what you choose now. The traveler felt his knees weaken, not from fear, but from the weight of comprehension. He pressed the key to his chest again, seeking its steady rhythm. It answered. They walked together through the garden. Beyond the walls, the city unfolded in layers, each more intricate than the last. Towers arched higher, their surfaces alive with patterns of memory. Children running through doorways, elders closing books, lovers holding hands beneath rain. Each tower was both monument and mirror. The traveler realized they were not merely collective. They were also personal. Some images stirred him with strange familiarity, as though whispering of a life he had forgotten but not lost. They came upon a narrow street where the houses leaned closer, their stones almost touching overhead. This passage felt heavier, shadowed. The guide stopped before one house darker than the rest. Its windows were blind, its doors sealed by stone. This, the guide said softly, is a place built of denial. Memories refused do not vanish. They dwell here, waiting. Would you enter? The traveler's breath caught. His instinct was to step back, but the key warmed insistently, reminding him of its purpose. Not force, but consent. He nodded. The stone door did not resist. It crumbled into dust at his touch, leaving a frame of silence. Inside, the air was dense. The walls were not empty, but layered with shadows. Arguments never spoken, truths avoided, acts hidden. They moved like smoke, curling, forming shapes that dissolved before recognition. At the center of the room stood a figure, cloaked in gray. Its face was his own. Not entirely, but enough. The same hesitation, the same fear of being seen. The traveler felt his chest tighten. He reached out with the key, unsure whether it could unlock a shadow. The figure mirrored him, raising its own hand. For breath, both stood suspended, mirrors facing mirrors. Then the guide's voice filled the space, gentle but unyielding. To deny what is yours is to build with hollow stone. The city accepts no disguises. It will show you what you hide, until you can accept that even shadows are part of your architecture. The traveler lowered his hand. The shadow lowered too. They stood together in stillness, and slowly the figure dissolved back into the walls. The room brightened faintly, not radiant, but less heavy. When they stepped outside again, the house was no longer sealed. Its windows glimmered faintly, enough to suggest a beginning. The traveler exhaled, long and trembling. The guide looked at him, not with triumph, not with pity, but with the same serenity as before. You see now, he said, that what is denied weakens the structure. What is accepted, even if painful, strengthens it. Every choice is architecture. They walked on. The city unfolded into another square, this one filled with arches that led nowhere. Each arch stood tall and intricate, carved of the same transparent stone. Yet when he looked through them, he saw only more arches, endlessly receding. Some arches glowed bright, others dim. He hesitated, unsure of their meaning. The guide turned to him. Each arch is a promise. Some fulfilled, some abandoned. The ones you kept lead onward. The ones you broke lead nowhere, until you choose again. The traveler stepped beneath a dim arch. For a moment, he felt a pang of regret, as though recalling a vow once broken. He stepped back, and the arch flickered weakly. Then he moved to another, brighter one. This arch opened into a vista of gardens and laughter. He walked through and emerged safely on the other side. When he looked back, the dim arch remained. It had not vanished, had not condemned him. It simply waited. The guide's voice followed him. Nothing is erased. Nothing is wasted. Every promise, every silence, every choice, Each builds, each remains. The city is not here to punish, but to remind, to show you what you build, and to ask, is this what you would inhabit? The traveler stood beneath the arches, the question circling him like a tide. His throat ached with words unspoken, and though his voice cracked, he managed to whisper, "What have I built?" The guide's eyes softened. "Look around you. The answer is always before you." The traveler turned, and the city breathed with him. Towers pulsed, rivers flowed, flowers bloomed, shadows lingered, and he understood that each was not separate, not foreign. They were his, and they were everyone's, and they were eternal. He pressed the key to his chest again. It warmed, patient, unhurried. The guide said nothing more, for nothing more was needed. The lesson was not in the telling. It was in the seeing. He lingered among the arches long after the guide's words had faded into the silence. The arches did not pressure him, did not demand he choose again. They simply stood, each carrying its weight, waiting as patiently as stone. He realized that patience itself was part of the city's architecture. Nothing hurried here, nothing forgot. When he stepped away, the arches seemed to recede without moving, as though the lesson was not left behind but absorbed into him. The streets opened again, winding toward a higher elevation. The towers grew taller here, their transparent walls filled with moving light. From below, he had seen only pulses. Now, approaching, he discerned more. Within each tower, scenes unfolded endlessly, moments drawn not from grandeur, but from the texture of lives. One tower showed people gathering at a table, breaking bread and laughter. Another carried the solemn quiet of someone sitting vigil through the night. Another pulsed with the tenderness of forgiveness offered after long estrangement. Each tower was like a vessel of memory, yet none belonged to a single person. They belonged to all, woven into a greater fabric. The traveler raised his eyes higher and saw that some towers glowed bright as constellations, while others were dim, their images faint, almost forgotten. He felt a pull of sorrow toward the dim ones. The guide, walking quietly beside him, spoke at last. Not all memories are tended. Some are abandoned, some denied, but still they remain. Light fades when love withdraws, yet it never vanishes entirely. A spark always lingers. Even the faintest can be kindled again. The traveler wanted to ask how, but the answer came before his lips formed the words. One of the dim towers flickered as they passed, its images trembling. He paused and placed his hand upon the transparent wall. For an instant, warmth traveled through him. The tower brightened, only slightly, but enough to prove the guide's words true. Every choice is architecture, the guide repeated softly. They moved onward, and the streets led them to another river. This one was wider than the first, flowing with a deeper current. Its waters shimmered with more complex images, nations rising and falling, wars waged and ended, great discoveries, works of art born from solitude, revolutions that reshaped lives. These were not small gestures, but collective memories, shared architectures that spanned generations. The traveler knelt by the riverbank, overwhelmed. The current swept by too swiftly for him to grasp its totality. He touched the surface, and the river stilled just enough to show him a single scene. A circle of strangers joining hands to lift rubble after an earthquake, sweat and grief mingling, yet also hope. The image passed quickly, replaced by others. Scientists bending over a shared experiment, voices chanting for freedom, a child reading beneath lamplight in a language newly preserved. His chest swelled with awe. He had wondered if his choices mattered, if his small acts were swallowed by time. Now he saw that not only the small, but the vast were preserved here. Every choice joined others, becoming rivers that fed into oceans. He rose unsteady, feeling both infinitesimal and infinite. The guide watched him. You see now the city is not yours alone. It is ours. Each life lays stones. Each hand shapes walls. Each voice etches windows. Together, they build a dwelling for more than memory, for meaning. They crossed a bridge of light spanning the river. It did not arch. It grew straight from bank to bank, as though remembering the path people had already taken 1,000 times before. When they reached the other side, the city narrowed into a passage between two immense walls. The walls themselves were alive with inscriptions. He traced them with his eyes, realizing they were not words in any language he knew. They were imprints, carved not by letters, but by choices. Each mark was a decision made, a path taken, a silence chosen. They formed a script the soul could read, even if the mind could not. He stopped before one mark, a spiral etched deeply, pulsing faintly. Without knowing how, he recognized it. A moment of surrender, someone laying down pride in order to forgive. He touched it, and the mark vibrated gently under his fingers. The echo traveled through him and then subsided. He stepped back in reverence. The guide's voice broke the stillness. You have asked, what have I built? The city is already answering. Look not for judgment. Look for recognition. What you have built is what you will walk within. They left the passage and emerged into a vast plaza. Here the city seemed to gather itself. Towers, gardens, rivers, houses, arches, all converged toward this space. At its center stood a great structure, neither tower nor temple, but something between. Its walls were translucent, rising like waves frozen in motion. Light moved within them, a slow tide shifting images through its surface. The traveler felt drawn to it, though he did not yet understand what it held. As they approached, he felt the city's silence deepen. Not emptiness, but anticipation. It was as though every street, every river, every garden had led here, and now all waited for him to cross the threshold. The guide stopped at the base of the structure. His luminous cloak shimmered faintly, carrying both dust and dawn. He turned to the traveler with a gaze both impersonal and intimate. You are ready to enter, he said. But remember, what you see inside will not be the city alone. It will be yourself, joined with the many. Do not fear if you meet what you had hoped to forget. Even shadows are part of the house. The traveler's throat tightened. He gripped the key with trembling fingers. He remembered the sealed house of denial, the figure of his own shadow, the arches of broken promises. He wondered what more awaited him inside this greater hall. Yet he knew the city had asked only one thing of him: consent. Not force, not mastery, but willingness. He nodded. The guide's eyes softened, though his voice remained steady. Then stepped forward. Every choice is architecture, and this choice is yours. The traveler drew a breath that seemed to gather not only air, but memory itself. He placed the key against his chest once more, feeling its warmth anchor him. Then he lifted his foot and crossed the threshold. Inside, the light shifted. It was not blinding, but vast. The walls shimmered like living glass, showing not single scenes, but entire patterns of lives weaving together. His breath caught as he realized he was not alone. Silhouettes moved within the light. Countless figures, walking, pausing, building, dismantling, embracing. Some were clear, some faint, some radiant, some dim. He stepped further, and the hall unfolded, endless, boundless, filled with the architecture of every choice ever made. The hall widened as he walked, though he never felt the floor tilt or the walls bend. It expanded with him, as if the very act of stepping forward summoned new space. The silhouettes he had glimpsed within the walls now drew closer, gaining shape. They were not strangers, nor friends, nor family, but all at once. Faces flickered, dissolving and reforming, each carrying an echo of recognition that pierced him without explanation. He stopped. A figure separated itself from the luminous crowd, stepping into clarity. It was neither veiled nor shrouded, but formed of translucent light, as though made of memory itself. Its eyes held no features, and yet they gazed at him with impossible intimacy. "You are part of us," the figure said, not in sound, but in the resonant way truth speaks inside. "And we are part of you. The city is not outside you. It is your extension. Every stone, every river, every tower, these are not monuments of the world. They are the scaffolding of your soul." The traveler felt the ground beneath him pulse. His knees weakened. He pressed the key to his chest, grounding himself in its steady warmth. The figure moved closer. The hall responded. Its walls brightened, its patterns quickened. "Do you see? Choices are not forgotten. Each builds a chamber. Each breath lays a brick. What you hide does not vanish, it waits. What you give does not vanish, it shines." The traveler wanted to ask, "And what of failure? What of harm? What would I regret?" But the figure answered before the thought could leave him. "Even what you regret is written here. Not to condemn, but to remind. Regret is not a wall. It is an unfinished arch. You may complete it still." The words sank into him like roots through soil. He looked around, and for the first time saw not only beauty, but incompleteness. Towers paused in mid-rise, rivers narrowing into trickles, gardens half-bloomed. He felt sorrow at the incompletion, but also hope, for the city did not mourn. It waited. The guide, silent until now, stepped forward and placed a hand on the traveler's shoulder. His touch was not weight, but steadiness. "You asked what you have built. Look and know. You have built both stone and light, both shadow and song. You are neither only your towers, nor only your ruins. You are the city entire." Tears gathered in the traveler's eyes, though he did not remember ever having wept. The hall shimmered, reflecting his tears as though each drop was a pearl added to its design. They moved deeper. The walls rose higher, and with them the resonance of countless lives. Voices whispered, not in unison, but in harmony. He recognized none, yet he belonged to them all. The hall became a chorus of existence, and he was both audience and participant. At the center, a vast chamber opened, circular, domed not by stone but by light woven into a canopy. The canopy shimmered with constellations, though not of stars, of choices, each shining with the intensity of a life lived. Some constellations were radiant, some faint, but all formed part of the whole. He stood beneath it, trembling. The guide spoke again. "This is the architecture of souls. No one builds alone. Every kindness adds to the tower of another. Every silence echoes in a neighbor's house. What you are is inseparable from what all are. The city is communion. It is the memory of us together." The traveler felt his chest break open, not in pain, but in vastness. He saw it then, how each choice radiated outward, intersecting with others, forming networks of meaning. No act was isolated. No word was lost. The city thrived or dimmed according to the weaving of all hearts. He whispered into the chamber, his voice clear now, "Every choice is architecture." The words did not return as echo. They wove themselves into the canopy, sparking a new constellation. For a brief moment, the dome blazed, brighter than anything he had yet seen. And in that brilliance he felt it, not knowledge, but belonging. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed. The key slipped from his hand and landed softly on the floor. Instead of clattering, It sank slightly into the luminous ground, embedding itself as though it had always been meant to rest there. The warmth in his chest remained, even without the key. He understood. The key was never outside him. It was the symbol of consent he had already given. The guide bent, lifted the key, and returned it to him. "You will need it still," he said, "for the city does not end here. This is only the first hall. Many more await, and each will ask again, 'What will you build?'" The traveler closed his fingers around the key, but now it felt lighter, as if it had grown accustomed to him, or perhaps as if he had grown accustomed to it. He rose slowly, steadied by the guide's presence. The figure of memory stepped back into the walls, merging once more with the luminous multitude. The chorus quieted, not to end but to rest, as though pausing for him to carry forward what he had received. The guide led him back toward the threshold of the hall. As they stepped out, the plaza received him anew. The towers still pulsed, the rivers still flowed, the gardens still bloomed, the houses still stood in shadow and light. But he saw them differently now. They were no longer curiosities. They were mirrors. The guide spoke only once more before falling silent. "You have entered your own architecture. Do not forget what it revealed. The city remembers. So must you." They walked together across the plaza. The traveler felt the weight of the city not as burden, but as belonging. Behind him, the great hall shimmered, still alive, still recording, still building. Ahead, the streets wound into new paths. He did not know where they led. He did not need to know. For the first time since awakening in the desert, he felt not lost but placed. He belonged to the city, and it belonged to him. The silence returned, but it was no longer heavy. It was invitation, and as he stepped forward, he understood that the journey was only beginning. The city did not lead him only into light. After the great hall and the constellations of choices, the streets narrowed, their brilliance dimming. He did not feel expelled nor punished. Rather, the city seemed to whisper that every dwelling has its cellars, every temple its shadows. He followed without resistance, sensing this too was part of what he had come to see. The air grew heavier. The crystalline towers that once shimmered with vibrant memories now flickered faintly, as though their light had grown weary. The streets bent inward, their paths darker, narrower. He felt less the guidance of invitation and more the pull of gravity, as if his own weight summoned this place. At last, he entered a garden. It was nothing like the radiant fields he had seen before, where each flower bloomed with acts of kindness and small fidelities. Here, the soil was dry, the flowers withered, their petals brittle as parchment. Some stalks bent under invisible burdens, others crumbled at the touch of wind. The fragrance was not of remembrance, but of neglect. He bent to touch one stem. It broke at once, falling to dust in his palm. Within that dust he saw an image flicker, too quick to grasp fully, but enough to pierce. It was a glimpse of harsh words spoken, love withheld, a gesture never offered. The flower had recorded it, but without nourishment it had perished. He dropped the dust, his heart constricting. The garden stretched far, littered with such ruins. Pools of stagnant water reflected twisted shapes of the towers he had passed. Their lines bent unnaturally, their symmetry lost. He leaned over one and saw his reflection, but distorted, elongated, shadowed. His eyes were hollow, his mouth stern, his posture rigid with pride. He recoiled. The water rippled and the image dissolved, but the echo remained within him. The further he walked, the darker the city grew. The crystal walls clouded, no longer transparent, but opaque, their surfaces bearing cracks. He realized he was walking not among forgotten memories of others, but into his own neglected chambers. The houses here were smaller, cramped, their doors shut tight. Some shuddered faintly, as though something inside pressed to be released. He stopped before one. The key in his hand grew cold. Unlike before, it did not pulse with warmth, but with a chill that cut his palm. He hesitated, his breath fog in the air, though no cold wind blew. He knew, without knowing how, that this was not a place he could bypass. He stepped inside. The air within was dense, thick with smoke that had no source. The walls pulsed faintly with shadows moving across them. Shapes twisted and shifted, faces that accused, eyes that judged, voices that whispered in tones he almost recognized. He pressed forward, though his chest tightened with each step. At the center of the room, a figure stood. It was cloaked in gray, but unlike the shadows he had seen before, this one was solid, heavy, undeniable. Slowly, the figure lifted its head. He gasped. It was his own face, yet not the one he had known. This face bore every weight he had tried to forget. Anger unspoken, shame buried, envy hidden, fear denied. Its eyes glared with a mixture of accusation and sorrow. The figure spoke, and its voice was his voice, though deeper, harsher. "You pretend to build with light," it said, "but look at what you have left behind. Look at the words you never said, the hands you never reached for, the times you turned away. You wear silence as if it were wisdom, but often it was fear. You wear strength as if it were virtue, but often it was pride." The traveler staggered back. He wanted to deny it, but the words struck too precisely. Memories rose unbidden, fragments of life he had not thought would follow him here. A moment of cruelty he had excused, a promise broken by cowardice, a kindness withheld. Each memory pressed against his chest, heavier than stone. The figure stepped closer. Its shadow lengthened, filling the room, wrapping around him like chains. "You do not belong among the towers of light," it hissed. "You belong here, among the ruins. You have built with neglect as much as with care. You have built with cowardice as much as with courage. Admit it, this is your true city." The traveler fell to his knees. The key slipped from his hand and clattered on the floor. For the first time since waking in the desert, he felt utterly powerless. The warmth he had carried was gone, replaced by cold. He pressed his hands against his face, ashamed, unwilling to look. But the guide's voice rose softly from behind, steady and unwavering. "Do not flee. What you see is your shadow. To reject, it is to reject yourself. To accept, it is to make the city whole." The traveler trembled. His shadow loomed larger, its breath thick, its eyes burning. Every instinct told him to resist, to deny, to fight. But the words of the guide pressed deeper. To reject is to fragment, to accept is to heal. Slowly, he lowered his hands. He looked at the figure. He saw not only accusation but pain, the pain of being exiled, denied, silenced. He understood then, this shadow was not his enemy. It was the part of him that had been abandoned. His voice cracked as he whispered, "You are mine." The shadow froze. Its eyes widened, its form flickered. "I see you," he said louder this time. "I have feared you. I have hated you. But you are part of me. You carry my wounds, my failures, my hidden fears. I will not banish you. You are mine." The figure shuddered, its body unraveling into strands of gray light. It dissolved slowly, painfully, as though resisting and yearning for release all at once. When at last it broke apart, it did not vanish, it entered him. A surge of warmth flooded his chest. The key on the floor glowed faintly and lifted itself back into his palm. The room brightened. The smoke cleared. The walls steadied, their cracks sealing. The oppressive air lifted into clarity. When he stepped outside again, the garden had changed. The withered flowers now stirred, faint blossoms opening where dust had been. The stagnant pools cleared, their reflections straightening, no longer twisted. The air carried a new fragrance, fragile but alive. He fell to the ground, exhausted but lighter. The guide knelt beside him, placing a hand upon his shoulder. "You have faced what many turn away from," the guide said, "and you have not destroyed it, but embraced it. That is the path of wholeness. The shadow does not vanish when accepted. It becomes light. Remember, even darkness can be a builder." The traveler closed his eyes. His tears soaked the earth, and where they fell, tiny shoots rose, green and trembling, defying the aridity. He understood now. Every part of him, even the parts he had feared, belonged to the architecture. When he opened his eyes again, the garden was no longer murching. It was budding, hesitant but certain. The night within him had begun to turn toward dawn. The traveler remained seated on the ground, his breath ragged, his chest heavy yet strangely unbound. The garden around him shifted as if relieved, its soil loosening, its air clearing. But within, the work was not finished. He felt the shadow still inside him, not dissolved, not erased, but seated quietly in a place it had long been denied. At first he feared it would rise again, accusing, choking him from within, but did not. It rested, and in its resting he understood. What resists most fiercely outside us longs only for a home within. The guide stood nearby, watching in silence. He did not reach, he did not command. His presence was like a steady flame, enough to warm, not enough to consume. At length, the traveler rose. His legs trembled, but he found his balance. The key in his hand was warm once more, its weight familiar, its pulse steady. He looked around and saw the withered flowers stirring in the wind, fragile shoots pressing up through cracks in the earth. Pools that once reflected twisted versions of himself now calmed, their surfaces clear, showing the true lines of his face, tired, weathered, but honest. He whispered, almost to himself, "I thought I came here to find light, but I had to meet my darkness first." The guide inclined his head. "No tower stands without foundation, and foundations are laid in earth, not in air. To rise, you must first descend." They walked further into the garden. It was still uneven, still wounded. Many flowers remained brittle. Many trees stood leafless. But the path was clearer, less oppressive. The traveler sensed this was not a place to be perfected in a single encounter. It was a field he would return to again and again, each time seeing more, embracing more. As they moved, he saw another figure waiting. His body stiffened. The shadow had returned, but not as before. This one was smaller, quieter, almost childlike. It sat beneath a dying tree, knees drawn to chest, eyes wide with fear. The traveler approached slowly. This was not the accusing voice of pride or anger. This was his forgotten child, the self he had once abandoned when pain grew too heavy. He knelt before it, his chest aching. The child whispered with his own voice, thin and broken, "You left me." The traveler closed his eyes. Images rose. Moments of deep loneliness, times when he had silenced his own cry for help, choosing hardness instead of honesty. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the words would not come. He reached instead, placing his hand on the child's trembling shoulder. "I did," he confessed. "I left you. I thought I had to be strong. I thought you were weakness, but you're not weakness. You're the part of me that still feels. I see you now. I will not leave again." The child's eyes filled with tears, but they did not fall. Slowly, its body relaxed. It leaned into him, and when he embraced it, the form dissolved into warmth that entered his chest, settling beside the older shadow he had already accepted. Together they became one flame, steadier, fuller. When he stood again, the tree under which the child had sat blossomed with sudden vigor. Its branches stretched upward, leaves unfurling, flowers opening in a rush of color. The fragrance spread through the garden, awakening other trees, coaxing life where there had been only decay. The traveler wept openly now, not from shame, but from release. The guide spoke again. This is the night every soul must walk. The night where shadows speak and wounds return. It is not punishment. It is remembrance. Only when you carry all of yourself do you walk in wholeness. The garden responded to their steps. Where the traveler's tears touched the soil, green shoots sprouted. Where he breathed deeply, the air cleared, scattering the last haze of smoke. Yet even in renewal, remnants of shadow lingered. Pools still rippled with unease. Flowers bloomed and withered in the same breath. He realized the garden was not meant to be perfected at once. It was a mirror, a living map of integration, never finished, always becoming. At the heart of the garden, they reached a fountain cracked and dry. Its basin was carved with images of faces, some radiant, some twisted. He bent over it and saw his own reflection merge with many others. Angry, joyful, wounded, laughing, grieving. All were him, and yet more than him. He reached into the basin with the key. For a moment, nothing happened. Then from the cracks, water burst forth, clear and strong, filling the fountain. The reflections danced in the flow, no longer frozen in twisted expressions, but moving freely, blending into one another. His face shifted among them, not fixed, but alive, part of a greater current. The guide touched his shoulder lightly. You see now, the shadow is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a river to be restored. Light without shadow blinds. Shadow without light suffocates. Together they make depth. The traveler gazed at the fountain, tears mingling with its waters. He understood now why this part of the city existed. Without it, the towers of memory would stand hollow, the rivers would run shallow, the gardens of kindness would be incomplete. The shadow was not the opposite of his architecture. It was its hidden foundation. The fountain overflowed, spilling into channels that ran outward through the garden. Wherever the water touched, flowers revived, trees strengthened, pools cleared. Not everything was restored, but much was awakened. The garden sighed with relief. The traveler turned to the guide. His voice, steadier now, asked, "Will there always be shadow?" The guide's eyes softened. "Yes, as long as you are becoming, shadow will walk with you. But once embraced, it does not rule. It accompanies. To be whole is not to be without shadow. It is to walk with it in peace." The traveler nodded, accepting. He pressed the key against his heart once more. This time it pulsed not only with warmth, but with balance. Light and shadow, both acknowledged, both necessary. As they left the fountain behind, the traveler looked back one last time. The garden was still scarred, but alive. It no longer frightened him. He knew he would return again and again, each visit an act of healing, each acceptance another stone laid in his architecture. The guide gestured toward a path that led upward, away from the garden. "Come, you have faced the depths. Now you are ready to rise again." The traveler followed, his steps unsteady but true. The darkness did not vanish behind him. It remained, breathing belonging. And for the first time, he did not fear its presence. He carried it with him, not as burden, but as part of the whole. They climbed the path upward, the guide at his side, the garden stretching behind them like a memory, both heavy and renewed. Yet the traveler sensed the work was not finished. Each step pressed into soil that carried both fragrance and ash, both life and what still resisted. He understood now. Renewal does not come in a single act. It unfolds, as wounds do, layer by layer. The air grew darker again, not the suffocating smoke of before, but a dusk that lingered in the veins of the garden. They reached a clearing, and at its center stood a mirror. It was not mounted on wall or frame. It rose from the ground itself, tall as a tower, wide as a gate. Its surface rippled like water, though no breeze touched it. The traveler approached. At first it showed nothing, only a void. Then, slowly, an image appeared. It was him, but not as child, not as accusing shadow. This was a fuller figure, proud, brilliant, admired. He saw himself clothed in robes of authority, speaking words that silenced others, making decisions that shaped lives, demanding respect. His reflection looked powerful, commanding. And yet, as he watched, the image cracked. Through the fissures he saw the truth, the fear hidden beneath the pride, the loneliness beneath the authority, the emptiness beneath the admiration. The reflection spoke with his own voice, smooth and sharp. You wanted to be seen. You wanted to be beyond question. You built towers to be praised, not as shelter. You gave, but only where it brought you recognition. You withheld where no one would notice. You sought to be admired, not to be known. Do you call that light? The traveler recoiled, ashamed. He had faced anger, fear, neglect. But this, the vanity of his own seeking, cut deeper. He wanted to shatter the mirror, to silence the voice. His hand lifted the key like a weapon. But the guide's voice came steady. Do not strike. To destroy is to deny. To accept is to redeem. He trembled. He lowered the key. He looked again at the reflection, letting its words pierce him. His tears rose, burning. At last he spoke, whispering, You are right. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be admired. I wanted the world to forget my wounds by clothing me in false light. But you are me. You are my hunger for worth. I will not cast you out. I will hold you too. The mirror shuddered. The cracks widened, spilling light instead of darkness. The reflection dissolved, not vanishing but merging back into him. Warmth surged through his chest, sharper this time, like fire and rain at once. He fell to his knees, pressing his hands against the earth. The ground responded. From beneath his palms, flowers bloomed in quick succession, climbing outward in spirals, weaving color into the clearing. Their fragrance was rich, not sweet, but deep, carrying both grief and joy. The guide stepped closer, resting a hand upon his shoulder. Now you see, the shadow takes many forms. It is not only your fear, not only your wounds. It is also your masks, your false light. Only by embracing all can you walk whole. The traveler nodded, tears streaking his face. The path forward glowed faintly. He rose again, and they walked together. Soon they reached the heart of the garden, a great tree, vast and ancient, its branches twisting high into the half-sky. But the tree was dying. Its bark was cracked, its leaves brittle, its roots exposed. Around it, the ground was barren, no flowers, no water. It seemed to carry the weight of all the garden's decay. The traveler stood before it, trembling. He knew, without words, that this was the core of his shadow, the wound from which the rest had grown. The tree pulsed faintly, its hollow trunk breathing with a rhythm of sorrow. He approached and pressed his forehead against the bark. Immediately, memories flooded him. Moments he had buried, voices he had silenced, betrayals he had excused. Regrets rose like a tide, drowning him. He felt himself sinking, gasping. He cried out, I cannot bear it. The guide's voice answered, firm but gentle, You cannot bear it alone. That is why you are here. Let the city bear it with you. Let life bear it with you. The traveler collapsed against the tree, wrapping his arms around its trunk. His tears poured freely, soaking into the bark. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, slowly, the tree responded. A faint glow spread through its branches. Leaves stirred, roots quivered. From its hollow, light poured out, not harsh but golden warm, ancient. The tree began to bloom, not as it once had, but anew. Flowers erupted along its branches, delicate and radiant, their colors blending like sunrise after storm. The traveler held it tightly, sobbing, until the last of his strength gave way. The shadow within him and the light outside merged in one flow. He felt himself emptied and filled at once. When at last he stepped back, the tree stood renewed. Its branches stretched wide, shading the garden in gentle radiance. Birds of light, small, winged forms, descended and nested among its leaves, singing songs that had not been heard before. The barren ground around the tree erupted in green, grasses and blossoms weaving into carpets of color. The stagnant pools cleared, the withered flowers revived. The entire garden transformed, as if released from a spell. Shadows remained, but they no longer dominated. They rested in balance with the light, giving depth, giving contrast. The air was fragrant, the soil fertile, the silence no longer suffocating but alive. The traveler fell to his knees once more, overcome. The guide knelt beside him, speaking softly. This is the night turned into dawn. You did not destroy your shadow. You embraced it. And in embracing, you freed not only yourself, but all that your life had touched. Remember, even what you fear builds something. When accepted, it builds strength. When denied, it builds prisons. Every choice is architecture, even the choice to embrace what you once fled. The traveler lifted his face, eyes wet but shining. He whispered, "Then the shadow was never my enemy. It was my teacher." The guide nodded. "Yes, and a teacher never leaves. It walks beside you, reminding you always of what you carry, of what you can become. But it need not bind you. It need only walk with you." They stood together beneath the blooming tree. The traveler placed the key against its trunk. The tree pulsed once, answering, and from its bark a symbol appeared, spiral and flame intertwined. The mark glowed briefly, then sank back into the wood, leaving no trace except the warmth in his chest. He understood now that the shadow was not gone. It would never be gone, but it was no longer master. It was companion. The garden sighed, alive and whole. The guide turned, gesturing toward a gate that had not been there before. It shone faintly, woven of branches and light, opening onto a new path. "Come," the guide said. "You have passed through your night. It is time to walk toward the morning." The traveler looked back once more at the garden. It was no longer a place of dread. It was part of him, scarred, blooming, unfinished, alive. He carried it now, not with shame, but with reverence. He stepped through the gate. The path from the garden rose gently, winding upward through narrow streets that grew brighter with every step. The air changed, less heavy, less burdened, yet not fully serene. It carried a sharpness, like a wind that clears but also reveals. The traveler walked slowly, sensing that each step was drawing him towards something more decisive than anything he had yet faced. At last, the street ended. Before him stretched a vast chasm, deeper than any canyon, its depths hidden by clouds of shimmering mist. And across that gulf hung a bridge. It was unlike any structure he had seen in the city. Suspended in midair, woven not from stone or steel but from strands of pure light, the bridge glowed as if alive. Each strand pulsed gently, like the veins of a great heart, carrying radiance back and forth across the abyss. Its surface was transparent, clear as crystal, and yet strong enough to bear the weight of eternity. The traveler approached the threshold. There were no gates, no guardians, only silence, and the faint hum of the bridge itself, vibrating like a harp string. He hesitated. The guide stepped beside him. "This is the bridge of transparency," the guide said softly. "It leads to the heart of the city, but it allows passage only to those who carry themselves fully. Nothing hidden may cross." The traveler's chest tightened. "What does that mean?" The guide's luminous eyes held steady. "It means that as you walk, every thought, every memory, every emotion you conceal will appear around you. You will see yourself as you are, and you must accept what you see. If you deny it, the bridge will falter." The traveler looked into the abyss, the strands of light swaying gently in unseen winds. His breath caught. He thought of the shadow he had embraced in the garden, of the child he had held, of the mirror he had faced. Had that not been enough? The guide seemed to hear his thought. "The shadow you faced was the beginning. Here, nothing remains hidden. The bridge is truth itself. Only in transparency can you walk forward." The traveler's hand tightened around the key. For a moment it felt heavier than ever, yet it pulsed faintly as if encouraging him. He nodded. His steps trembled, but he moved forward. The moment his foot touched the bridge, the air changed. At first, nothing seemed different. The surface was smooth, clear, carrying his weight without strain. But with the second step, light rose around him, forming a shimmer in the air. The shimmer thickened, then shaped itself into an image. He froze. It was him, younger, standing before someone in anger. His voice rang harsh, his face twisted with pride. He remembered the moment, words he had spoken that cut deep, words he had never apologized for. The image burned beside him, clear as if happening now. His instinct was to look away, to deny, but the bridge trembled faintly beneath his feet. He steadied himself and forced his gaze to remain. His voice cracked. "Yes, I said those words. They were mine. I will not hide them." The image flickered, then dissolved into light that folded back into the bridge. The trembling ceased. He exhaled sharply. With the next step, another image formed. A moment of kindness this time, offering food to a stranger, speaking gently to a frightened child. He felt his chest loosen, relief washing through him. The image shone brighter than the last, then too dissolved into the bridge. He realized then, not only faults, but also every act of love, every small fidelity would appear. Nothing would remain hidden, neither shadow nor light. He walked further. Images crowded him. Betrayals, kindnesses, silences, gestures. Some made him weep with sorrow, others with gratitude. One moment he had long forgotten appeared. A quiet evening when he had sat beside someone who grieved, saying nothing, only being present. He had thought it insignificant, yet here it glowed brighter than many others. Another moment came, him turning away from someone in need, consumed by his own pain. The shame was sharp, but he forced himself to whisper, "Yes, that was me too." The image dissolved. Step by step, the air around him filled with visions. The bridge shone brighter with each acceptance, weaving his truth into its fabric. But the strain grew heavier. His heart pounded. Each step was judgment and mercy at once. Halfway across, the images thickened. They did not appear one at a time now, but in floods. Dozens of selves surrounded him. Angry, tender, selfish, loving, cowardly, brave. He could hardly breathe. The bridge swayed under his weight. He cried out, "I cannot hold all this." The guide's voice carried across the gulf, steady. "You are not asked to hold. You are asked to accept. There is no other way." He felt at his knees on the transparent surface. Images swirled, him boasting, him failing, him forgiving, him betraying, him loving. He pressed his hands against his face, But the images did not vanish. They pressed closer, demanding to be seen. At last, he dropped his hands and looked. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, all of you are me. The pride, the fear, the cruelty, the kindness, the silence, the love. All of you are mine. I will not hide you. I will not deny you." The words shook him to the core. The images stilled. Then, one by one, they dissolved into threads of light that wove back into the bridge. The trembling ceased. The bridge grew brighter, steadier. The traveler rose slowly. His body shook, but his steps grew firmer. With each pace, new images rose, and with each, he repeated the same vow. "Yes, that too is me." The bridge responded with radiance. When he reached the midpoint, the abyss opened wider below him. The mist parted, revealing depths without end. For a moment, terror gripped him. What if he failed now? What if one image came he could not bear? The bridge pulsed beneath his feet. He pressed the key to his heart. Its warmth steadied him. He whispered into the silence, "The truth will not destroy me. It will free me." The air brightened. The images around him shimmered, not as accusations, not as praises, but as parts of a whole. They circled him like constellations, then folded gently back into the bridge. He took another step, and another. The heart of the city glowed ahead, nearer than ever. The bridge grew narrower as he advanced, though he sensed its strength had not diminished. It was not the bridge that wavered, but his own resolve. Each step awakened visions more piercing, more intimate. They were not only events of the past now, but thoughts he had carried secretly, desires he had never confessed, judgments he had buried deep. Around him the air shimmered with unspoken truths. Envy hidden behind smiles, bitterness disguised as wisdom, pride wrapped in gentleness. They appeared not as accusations, but as naked reality, stripped of excuses. He stumbled. The bridge pulsed sharply beneath him, reminding him denial was weight. Acceptance was passage. He forced himself upright. "Yes," he said through clenched teeth. "Yes, that was me. I envied, I boasted, I judged while pretending compassion. That too is part of me." The images flared once, then softened, folding back into the strands of light. The bridge steadied, but the flood did not ease. Another vision rose, himself gazing into a mirror, secretly admiring, hungering for recognition, whispering in his heart, "See me, praise me, do not forget me." The shame was sharp. He wanted to turn away, to hide. The bridge shivered violently. Tears welled in his eyes. He felt his knees and whispered, "Yes. Even that hunger is mine. Even that craving to be seen. I will not deny it." The vision softened, dissolving into radiance that streamed into the bridge. His chest loosened. Step by step, he pressed forward. The images shifted again, this time showing not pride or vanity, but the opposite. Moments of self-contempt, nights when he told himself he was nothing, that his life meant little, that he was unworthy of love. These memories cut deeper than the others, for they carried not guilt but despair. He faltered. "I cannot bear to look," he murmured. The guide's voice carried from the far side of the bridge, calm but firm. Transparency is not only seeing your faults, it is seeing your wounds without shame. Accept them, too, or the bridge will break. The traveler's hands shook as he lifted his gaze. He saw himself curled in shadows, whispering that he was less than others, that he had failed beyond repair. His heart ached, but then he whispered, voice trembling, "Yes, even that despair was me. Even that night belongs to my soul. I will not deny it." The image dissolved, and for the first time, he felt not only release but compassion for himself. A warmth spread through his chest, gentler than before. The bridge carried him further. Now the visions came not only as memories, but as emotions, pure and unmasked. Pride swelled before him, luminous but hollow. Envy coiled like smoke. Fear towered like a shadow. Yet alongside them appeared gentleness, fidelity, courage. They rose together, not separate, circling him like twin currents. He realized then, transparency did not mean separating the good from the bad. It meant seeing them together, whole. He whispered, stronger now, yes, all of you are me. I'm not only love, nor only fear. I am both, and I will walk carrying both. The visions merged, flowing into the bridge. Its radiance brightened, its hum deepened, but the trial was not finished. The abyss beneath the bridge stirred. The mist parted, revealing darkness without end. From it rose a final image, not a memory, not a feeling, but a question. What if he failed? The vision shaped itself into his deepest fear. Himself, falling from the bridge, cast out, rejected. A voice thundered inside him. You are not worthy. You will never cross. The heart of the city will not accept you. The terror was immense. His knees buckled, his breath caught. The bridge shook violently beneath his feet. The guide's voice reached him, but faintly, as though from great distance. The bridge does not measure worth. It reveals truth. Only your denial can cast you down. The traveler gripped the key tightly, pressing it to his chest. He cried out into the abyss. Yes, even this fear is mine. Even this terror of failing, even this dread of rejection is part of me. I accept it. I will not deny it. The vision screamed, then shattered into shards of light that rained down into the abyss, dissolving into silence. The bridge steadied, brighter than before, glowing now not only beneath him, but around him. His chest heaved, his body trembling, but his feet found strength again. He rose and walked forward, step by steady step. Each pace was easier now. The images still came, acts of kindness, moments of cruelty, nights of despair, mornings of joy, but none unbalanced him. He looked at each and whispered the same vow. Yes, you are mine. I accept you. And with each acceptance, the bridge sang louder, a resonance deep and clear, like the heartbeat of the city itself. The far side of the bridge shone now, close enough that he could see the gates of the inner city, radiant and open. He was near, but not yet across. He stood very still and listened, not to the city, not to the abyss, but to the clear place within where fear had learned to speak without disguise. The bridge did not hurry him. It held like a breath that would not become wind until he consented. He took one step, and the air thickened again, this time not with memories or scenes, but with a single brightness gathering itself into form. It was not a picture. It was a weight. He felt it first at the center of his chest, the exact density of his life when he refused it. Pride had weighed him, so had despair. Love had lifted, lies had lowered. The bridge seemed to receive every ounce, balancing without judgment, as though it were a scale woven of light. A feather appeared. No bird had brought it. No wing had shed it. It hung at his shoulder height, trembling in a current he could not feel. The weight in his chest answered it, a mute conversation of mass and mercy. He did not see a balance as the old stories told it, with pans and measures and a god's hand on the beam. He saw only the feather and what he carried, speaking in the language of nearness. He closed his eyes. The old impulse rose to bargain, to promise future goodness in exchange for the lightness of now. He did not bargain. He whispered, I will not seek to be lighter than I am. I will seek only to be true. The weight shifted, not less, not more, but honest. The feather steadied, then drifted forward an inch, as if to say, continue. Another step. The air around him became transparent to the point of tenderness. He saw not events, but motives, the small turns of heart beneath action. A kindness offered, yes, but tinged with a wish to be seen. A truth spoken, but sharpened to cut. A silence held, but chosen to avoid, not to protect. He had made a cathedral of motives without knowing it, pillars of mixed intentions holding up ceilings he had then called pure. He did not tear them down. He knelt within them. Yes, he said, and the word did not defend and did not accuse. It simply named. The pillars did not crumble. They clarified, the stone becoming glass, the glass becoming air. Where he had hoped to be spotless, he accepted being whole. The bridge brightened. He rose. The key in his hand grew warm again, then warmer, then quiet, like a hand that has pressed another's hand long enough to say what cannot be said and releases without letting go. He did not raise the key as weapon or proof. He pressed it to his chest and let it rest as if it were listening. The horizon of the far side widened. He could now see figures, few, still luminous, standing at the gate. The guide among them. The distance did not lessen his solitude, and yet it made it bearable. Presence across the gulf is still presence. The bridge carried him into a region of utter clarity. No images rose, no scenes. The silence was the kind that has heard everything and chooses not to repeat it. He walked 3, 4, 5 paces in that cleanness and realized this was the most demanding part of all. To go forward without spectacle, without proof, without confirmation that he was doing well. The bridge did not reward, it received. His thoughts tried to adorn the emptiness with imagined victories. He let them pass. His fears tried to return clothed as caution. He greeted them and did not follow. Under both, a quieter current flowed. You do not need to be better to be true. You need to be true to become better. He did not know if he had learned this sentence or if the bridge had breathed it into him. It did not matter. He trusted it. Half a dozen steps more, and the clarity gave way to one last summons. It did not come from behind, or before, or above, or below. It came from within, and it came as a question he had avoided phrasing. When all titles fall away, what name remains? He stood on the transparent strands and felt the abyss open not as threat, but as measure. How far could a truth fall and remain itself? How high could a truth rise and remain humble? He did not answer with a lineage or a deed. He shaped his mouth around the only name he could carry across this light. I am, he said, not to claim, not to compete, not to compare, to consent. The feather leaned toward him, as if listening at a doorway. The bridge hummed low, like a long-held note finding its resonance in a wider room. His chest did not empty, it aligned. He felt where sorrow fit, where joy fit, where anger, tenderness, hunger, patience, desire, and renunciation all had their places, not contending, but composing. He had not become perfect. He had become honest. He walked again, and this time the bridge met his feet the way firm ground meets a wanderer who has at last stopped apologizing for needing the earth. A final vision approached, not around him, but ahead, embedded in the strands like a memory sealed within crystal. He knew before seeing it that it was the hardest of all, because it was not a single fault, not a single virtue, not a single wound. It was a pattern, the way he had built his life around proving something no one had asked him to prove. He saw the scaffolding, the relentless work without rest, the help offered without receiving help, the relentless explanations to distant judges who never existed. He had mistaken self-justification for pilgrimage, argument for prayer. He did not despise the builder. He thanked him. You kept me moving until I could stop, he said softly. You kept me alive until I could live. He placed a palm upon the bright pattern, and felt it loosen like stitches cut free after healing. The structure did not collapse. It reformed, lighter, open to sky. The feather rose and settled directly before his heart, as if it would pass through him. It did not weigh him. It invited him to weigh himself as though kindness were a scale. He measured not the sum of deeds, but the sincerity of his consent. He did not count. He bowed. Far off, the gate widened. The figures at its threshold did not wave or call or signal success. They stood like trees do when wind becomes season, receptive, certain, present. He pressed the key to his chest once more and found that it no longer felt separate from his hand. He opened his fingers, and the key remained where it was, held not by grip, but by belonging. Now the bridge asked for the smallest, strangest act, to take a step that would never be proven right outside of him. No angel lifted a trumpet. No tower flashed. He took it anyway. The step landed without drama, and yet something fundamental relocated. He was now nearer to the heart of the city than to the shore from which he had come. The past did not dissolve. It took its rightful place behind him, not as chain but as road. He allowed himself a breath he had not allowed in years he could not name. The breath did not celebrate, it sanctified. For a span that could have been a minute or an age, nothing more occurred. He simply walked. The bridge did not perform. He did not perform. The abyss did not threaten. The sky did not declare. He found that this unadorned continuance was the greatest freedom. Transparency had emptied him of spectacle and filled him with steadiness. When, at last, one final ripple of light rose at the periphery, he did not flinch. He turned to it like one turns to a child waking from a long sleep. The ripple resolved into a small, almost ridiculous scene. He was laughing. Not to be heard, not to show ease, but from unarranged joy. Sunlight, where had there been sunlight, fell across a table. Someone else laughed too, not at him, not for him, but with him. Nothing grand had happened. Bread had been broken, a story told badly, a mistake forgiven in real time. He smiled at the vision. Yes, he said, that too. The strand absorbed it as if light recognizes light through any thickness of time. The far side was close now. The guide's outline separated from the others, not stepping forward, not reaching back. Merely being there in the way a harbor is there while a ship learns that arrival is not an achievement, but an agreement. One last contraction and the air gathered, and he knew it for what it was, the place in him that still believed he had to arrive alone. The bridge would not carry that belief. He paused. He let the belief speak, its pride, its fear of needing, its dread of burdening. He did not argue with it. He thanked it for guarding him when he had no other guard. Then he invited it to rest. It lay down like an old dog at the threshold of a new house. The feather drifted aside, not because he had become lighter than truth, but because truth had become light enough to carry. He took the last steps. The bridge did not end, it became gate. The strands of light braided themselves into an arch that recognized him the way a face recognizes its own expression. He did not pass under it so much as through it, as through a moment that had been waiting for his weight to complete its shape. The ground beyond was not brighter than the bridge, not softer, not grander. It was simply the heart of the city, near without distance, open without exposure, intimate without possession. He stood there without hurry. He did not look back. The bridge's hum receded into the deeper hum that seemed to belong to the whole city. The guide came to his side and did not speak. The silence they shared had no work left to do. It was not the silence before a truth, nor after one. It was the silence of truth present. Only then did a sentence arrive, not as instruction, but as recognition, landing first in the guide's eyes and then in his own chest, the way a bird will land on water that has remembered how to hold it. The truth sets free not by making you flawless, but by making you transparent. He stood within that sentence until it no longer felt like words. He breathed, and the city breathed with him. The key rested where it had rested all along. He did not lift it. He did not put away. He let it be the simple emblem of a more difficult vow. Already taken, already kept. I will walk as I am, becoming by being true. The gate widened behind him without needing him to notice. Ahead, the inner streets waited, not demanding, not promising, inviting. He turned toward them as a person turns toward a room in his own house that he has never entered sober, not because it was forbidden, but because he had always arrived pretending. He would not pretend now. He took one step onto the ground at the city's heart. No measure rose. No feather fell. The only scale left was the unmeasured steadiness of his consent. He walked on it as on earth. The first step upon the ground beyond the bridge was strangely ordinary. No thunder cracked. No gates flung wide. No choirs lifted hymns. It was the simple firmness of earth beneath his feet, and in that ordinariness lay its miracle. For he realized that truth, once carried without disguise, did not need spectacle. It needed only room. The air in the heart of the city was unlike any he had breathed before. It was not heavier, nor lighter, but clearer. It seemed to move through him rather than around him, as though the city itself inhaled and exhaled with his lungs. He paused, letting the breath align with his own, until the tremor in his chest quieted. The guide stood beside him. He did not speak. He did not need to. His silence was not withholding. It was recognition. The bridge behind them still glowed, its strands humming faintly, but now its song had merged into the deeper resonance of the city. The bridge had not vanished. It had become part of him. The traveler looked back once. He saw the transparent arc spanning the abyss, radiant as dawn on water. Yet he felt no pull to return, no fear that it might dissolve. What was crossed could not be uncrossed. The bridge was now memory, and memory was foundation. He turned forward again with no regret. The streets of the inner city opened ahead. They were narrower than the boulevards outside, less grand than the towers of memory. But they glowed with an intimacy that felt deeper than majesty. Their surfaces were translucent, like glass warmed by candlelight. As he walked, the stones beneath his feet revealed not visions but presence. Each step glimmered briefly, as if saying, "Here you are. Here you are." He reached a small square. At its center stood a basin of water, not grand, not shimmering with visions as others had. It was still plain clear. He approached and looked within. No images rose, no memories unfolded. He saw only his face, lined, imperfect, weary. Yet for the first time, he did not flinch. He did not look for radiance, nor dread shadow. He saw himself as he was, and it was enough. He bent, cupped water in his hands, and drank. The taste was not sweet, not bitter, only clean. It quenched a thirst he had carried without naming. The guide finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "This is the heart's water. It does not show what you were or what you will be. It shows what you are. To drink is to consent to the present." The traveler wiped his mouth and nodded. His chest felt steady, neither swollen with pride nor crushed with shame. Simply steady. The guide gestured to the square around them. The heart of the city is not reached by grandeur. It is reached by truth. The bridge did not weigh you to condemn. It revealed you to free. Here, nothing more is demanded. Here, you may dwell. The traveler closed his eyes. He listened. He expected proclamation, ceremony, a voice declaring completion. None came. Instead, he heard the quiet, birds fluttering in distant gardens, water trickling through channels, the low hum of the city breathing with him. It was the sound of belonging, unadorned. He sank to his knees beside the basin, not in worship, not in collapse, but in rest. His hands released the key, placing it gently on the stone rim. For a moment, he thought it would leave him, sink into the water or dissolve into air. But it remained, steady, waiting. He understood. The key was not something to surrender. It was something to carry until it dissolved naturally into his being. The guide sat beside him. No words passed between them. Their silence was a shared language now, one that spoke more clearly than speech. After a long while, the guide placed a hand over the traveler's chest. You have crossed, not because you were flawless, but because you were transparent. This is the freedom of truth. It makes no demand for perfection. It asks only that you consent to be seen. And in being seen, you are free. Tears rose again, but not from shame, not from fear. They were tears of relief, as if his body at last believed what his heart had begun to learn. He let them fall into the basin. The water rippled briefly, then stilled, carrying his face once more, softer now, steadier. The guide rose. Come, the city has more to show you. You have walked its memories, its shadows, its bridge. Now you will enter its innermost chambers. The traveler stood slowly, leaving the basin behind. The key pulsed once in his palm, not urgent, not heavy, just present. He looked toward the streets opening beyond the square. They were quiet, lit with gentle radiance. He felt no dread in entering them, only readiness. For the first time since waking in the desert, he whispered, not to steady himself, but to affirm, I am here. The city did not echo. It breathed with him, and that was enough. The streets of the inner city wound softly, as if they had no urgency. The traveler walked with measured steps, listening not only to the stones beneath his feet, but to the silence that now seemed to echo inside him. Each surface glowed, not with the sharp radiance of visions, but with a warmth that felt less like revelation and more like recognition. He reached a square smaller than the others. No towers stretched high above it. No rivers crossed it. No gardens bloomed within. It was plain, almost austere. At its center stood a single stone seat, worn as though countless had rested there before him. He lowered himself onto it and let the weight of his body settle. For the first time since the desert, he felt no command to move. The guide remained at a distance, quiet, allowing him to sit in stillness. The traveler closed his eyes. Within that stillness, he began to sense something uncanny. The city was breathing not only with him, but as him. Each tower's pulse aligned with his heartbeat. Each river's current mirrored the rhythm of his thoughts. The flowers that had bloomed carried the fragrance of his own forgotten joys, and the shadows that had once accused whispered now as echoes of his fears. His eyes opened slowly. The realization pressed upon him with both wonder and inevitability. The city was not external. It never had been. It was him. Every tower of memory, his. Every river of fidelity, his. Every garden of shadow, his. Every arch of promise, every bridge of truth, his. And yet, not his alone, for as the thought deepened, he saw that the architecture extended beyond him. The towers glowed not only with his memories, but with the lives of countless others. The rivers carried choices he had never made, yet which touched him. The arches bore promises kept and broken by voices he did not know, but which still wove into his path. The city was his, but it was also everyone's. It was the architecture of all souls, interwoven, indivisible. His breath trembled. He whispered into the quiet, "Then I have never walked alone." The silence accepted his words, not with echo, but with stillness, the kind of stillness that means yes. He rose from the stone seat. The streets did not guide him now. He guided them. Wherever his steps turned, paths opened. He wandered without plan, seeing familiar places from within a new lens. The fountain where he had glimpsed motives now rippled gently, reflecting not judgment, but clarity. The house that had once been sealed now stood open, its windows filled with soft light. Even the garden of shadows appeared not as a wound, but as a depth, shading the brilliance of the flowers that bloomed anew. Each place spoke the same word, within. The guide finally approached, his cloak shimmering faintly as dust caught in sunlight. His voice carried not instruction, but companionship. You see it now? The city is not a place you entered. It is a place you remembered. It was always within you. The traveler nodded, his throat tight, and within all. The guide inclined his head. Yes, for what is built by one belongs to all. What is healed in one strengthens all. You walk your own city, and you walk the city of every soul. They are not two, they are one. Tears welled again, but this time they were not heavy. They came like rivers after rain, clear, inevitable, cleansing. As they walked, the guide gestured toward the horizon. The traveler turned and saw, beyond the inner streets, the desert stretching once more. But it was no longer barren. It shimmered faintly, dissolving at the edges, as though it had never been emptiness, but only the veil before recognition. The desert was fading, not destroyed, but absorbed into the city's infinite horizon. He thought back to the first steps he had taken there, the silence, the despair, the loneliness. He remembered asking what he had built, fearing the answer. And now, as the desert dissolved, he realized the answer had always been within. He had built himself, and himself was inseparable from all. The guide stopped and turned toward him. The call you heard in the desert, do you know now where it came from? The traveler pressed the key to his chest. Its warmth spread through him, steady, gentle. He whispered, it was never from outside. It was from within. The one who called and the one who answered were the same. The guide's eyes softened, luminous as dawn. Then you have learned the truth of the city. The seeker and the sought are one. The builder and the dwelling are the same. The words resonated through him with a depth that needed no proof. He felt the city pulse again, not beneath his feet, not around his body, but within his chest. He closed his eyes and saw towers rise from his breath, rivers flow from his veins, gardens blossom from his tears. He saw arches curve from his promises, bridges form from his consent. He saw a city within, infinite, interconnected, alive. And in the far distance, he saw other travelers too, walking their own cities, carrying their own keys, building their own bridges. None walked alone, though many thought they did. Each path was unique, yet every step echoed in the architecture of all. The traveler opened his eyes and whispered, as if to the listener who might one day hear his story. And perhaps, as you listen now, you are walking your own city, brick by brick, breath by breath. The silence received it, and the city glowed brighter, as though every soul listening had added another stone. The traveler walked deeper into the heart of the city, yet each step felt less like entering a place and more like entering himself. The streets no longer opened before him as mysteries, but as mirrors. Each stone underfoot whispered of moments that had seemed fleeting in their time, but now revealed themselves as foundations. He paused before a wall of translucent crystal. It shimmered faintly, and as he reached his hand to it, images stirred, small, almost insignificant gestures. A smile offered to a stranger, a hand resting on a friend's shoulder, a word of patience when irritation would have been easier. Each appeared and vanished quickly, like sparks. At first he dismissed them, too small, too fragile. But the wall brightened with everyone. Slowly he understood. These were the true bricks of eternity. not the grand moments sung by crowds, but the quiet fidelities that no one else may have noticed. His chest ached, but this time with tenderness. He whispered, "So this is how the eternal is built, not in towers of power, but in gestures of love." The wall pulsed softly, as if agreeing. He moved on and entered a courtyard. At its center was a tree, not vast like the one in the Garden of Shadows, but modest, its branches slender, its leaves shimmering faintly. Hanging from its branches were countless lanterns, each one glowing with gentle light. He touched one, and it opened, revealing an image, a moment when he had chosen truth over convenience, even at cost to himself. The lantern glowed brighter. He touched another, a moment when he had forgiven, not fully, not perfectly, but enough to release the chain of bitterness. That lantern too brightened. Yet when he reached for another, it revealed not kindness but failure, an act of selfishness, a moment of cruelty. The lantern dimmed, almost extinguished. His heart sank. The guide appeared beside him, his presence quiet. "Do not despair. Every act remains, but none are sealed. Light may dim, but it may also be kindled anew. Even what failed may become seed if you choose again." The traveler let his hand rest on the dim lantern. He whispered, "Yes, I see you. You are mine too. You are my failure, but you are not wasted." The lantern flickered, and though it did not blaze, it steadied as if awaiting a future flame. He stepped back, gazing at the branches heavy with lanterns. Together they formed a constellation, fragile but beautiful, not perfect but alive. And he knew. The architecture of his soul was not a monument to his greatness, but a living record of his choices, both luminous and broken. They left the courtyard and entered a narrow passage. Here the air grew still, and the walls reflected not images of actions, but emotions themselves. He saw love as a stream of gold, anger as fire, fear as shadow, hope as dawn light. They swirled together, sometimes colliding, sometimes weaving. At first he feared the collisions, anger cutting through love, fear choking hope. But as he watched, he saw something deeper. Even the collisions built patterns. Love scarred by anger became compassion. Hope tested by fear became resilience. Nothing was wasted. He whispered, awed, "Even my wounds built something." The guide's eyes softened. Yes, the eternal is not made only from light. It is made from the weaving of light and shadow. From wounds, compassion. From loss, longing. From longing, growth. This is the alchemy of the soul. The passage opened into a chamber with no roof, only open sky. Stars shimmered overhead, though no night had fallen. They were not distant, but near, almost within reach. Each star pulsed faintly, and as he watched, he understood. They were not celestial fires, but choices, his and others, woven into a constellation of meaning. He reached upward, and one star glowed brighter. In it he saw a memory of a word he had once spoken in truth, though his voice had trembled. He reached toward another, and it showed him a sacrifice he had made quietly, without recognition. Both pulsed brighter, joining others until they formed a pattern that felt familiar, though he could not name it. The guide stood beside him. Do you see now? Eternity is not a distant reward. It is built daily, in choices often forgotten by the world, but never by the soul. What you give builds forever. What you withhold also builds, but differently. Every act is a star. The traveler's eyes filled with tears. And every act is shared. My choices weave into others, theirs into mine. The city is ours. The stars above shimmered brighter, as though echoing his words. For a moment, he felt himself both infinitesimal and infinite, one thread among countless, yet essential to the whole. He whispered into the open air, not only to himself, but to whoever might hear, now or in ages to come. And perhaps you too, as you listen now, are weaving your own constellation, star by star, choice by choice. The silence deepened, holding the sentence like a vessel. The city pulsed gently, as though another stone had been placed, another star lit. They walked on. Ahead lay another fountain, smaller than the others. Its waters did not show images, nor reflect stars, nor bloom flowers. They showed only ripples, circles widening endlessly. The traveler knelt and touched the surface. At once he saw it. Every act he had done, every word spoken, every silence held, every gesture given or withheld, each had rippled outward, touching lives beyond his knowing. He saw strangers altered by his presence, even in passing. He saw kindness passed forward like water poured into other hands. He saw wounds inflicted that rippled in a sorrow he would never witness. His heart broke at the weight of it, but the guide placed a hand on his shoulder. Do not despair. The ripples are not yours to control. They are only yours to begin. What you give continues beyond you, carried by others. What wounds you cause may be healed by another's mercy. What mercies you offer may heal wounds you never knew existed. You are part of a river larger than yourself. The traveler bowed his head. He whispered into the water, "Then let my choices be seeds of mercy. Let what I have failed be healed by those who come after me. And let what I have loved endure." The ripples glowed faintly, as if blessing his vow. When he rose, his chest felt heavy and light at once. Heavy with the truth that nothing he had done was without effect. Light with the hope that nothing was beyond redemption. The guide led him further, and he realized now that every street, every square, every chamber repeated the same lesson in different forms. The eternal is built not in grandeur, but in the weaving of daily choices, love given, shadow embraced, truth accepted. And as he walked, he felt the city less as a place he visited and more as a rhythm he carried, a heartbeat he could never lose. The traveler wandered deeper into the city, though deeper no longer meant distance. Each step was not toward a new street, but toward a fuller presence of himself. The walls glowed softly, no longer showing visions, but breathing with him. The air was tender, like a friend's hand resting on his shoulder. He reached a wide terrace that overlooked the horizon. From here he could see the city entire, towers rising like memories given form, gardens shimmering with forgiven shadows, rivers coursing with fidelities, the luminous bridge stretching back across the abyss. For a moment he felt awe at its beauty, but then a deeper realization struck. None of it was outside him. He was not looking at a city. He was looking at his soul. The guide appeared beside him. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Do you see now?" The traveler's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, every tower, every garden, every river within me, and within all." The guide nodded. "The city is not an elsewhere. It is the dwelling of your choices, the architecture of your love, the embrace of your shadow, the transparency of your truth. You do not walk it as guest. You walk it as builder." The traveler pressed the key to his heart. For the first time, it no longer pulsed as object. It pulsed as heartbeat. He realized the key was never a thing he carried. It was himself, his consent, his willingness to see. He closed his eyes, and the city did not vanish. It bloomed within, vast and luminous. He whispered, "Then the eternal is not a distant reward. It is built here, in each breath, in each choice, in each act of love or silence embraced." The guide's hand rested lightly on his shoulder. "Yes, and now you understand the secret. The seeker and the sought are one. The voice you followed was never from beyond. It was your own soul calling you home. The traveler wept openly, not in sorrow, but in release. And now, dear listener, perhaps you feel it too. Perhaps, as his footsteps echo through these streets, you are sensing your own. For the city is not his alone. It is yours. Brick by brick, choice by choice, breath by breath, you are building it now. Look within, and you will see your own towers of memory, your own gardens of shadow, your own rivers of fidelity, your own bridge of truth. You may think they are small, fragile, unnoticed. Yet here they rise eternal. And perhaps, yes, perhaps, even as you listen now, you are walking your own city. The traveler turned once more to the horizon. The desert stretched beyond the city's edge, but even as he looked, it began to dissolve. What had once been barren and silent now shimmered like mist, fading into an infinite horizon. He understood at last. The desert was never emptiness. It was the veil of forgetfulness. It was the silence before recognition. It had done its work, and now it was gone. He whispered into the vastness, not to anyone, not to anything, but to the truth itself. The call was never from outside. It was always from within. The guide stepped back, his cloak shimmering with dust and dawn. He no longer needed to speak. His presence was enough, and the traveler knew. Even the guide was not separate. He was part of him, a face of wisdom the soul reveals when ready. The traveler placed both hands over his chest. The city pulsed within him, not as image, but as reality. He smiled through his tears. I'm not the guest. I am the dwelling. I'm not the seeker. I am the sought. The air brightened. The silence deepened. The city glowed as if every soul across time had placed one more stone. And perhaps you, too, who listen now, are placing yours. Perhaps, even in this very breath, your hand is shaping your own eternal dwelling. Perhaps your smallest act of kindness is already blooming as a lantern in your city. Perhaps your shadow, once feared, waits only to be embraced, so its garden may flower again. And perhaps the love you have given, the glance, the word, the touch you thought forgotten, already shines as a tower brighter than stars. Do you feel it? Do you hear it? The city is breathing with you. You are not alone. You never were. The traveler looked once more at the dissolving desert, at the horizon unfolding endlessly. He saw no end, no wall, no final gate. Only openness, infinite, eternal. He stepped forward into that openness, not to leave the city, but to carry it within, wherever he would walk. And in that step lay the truth. The eternal is not beyond. It is within. He lingered at the edge of the terrace until the horizon no longer looked like a line, but like breath, coming, going, coming again. The city did not require a farewell. It did what living things do, it remained. He placed one palm on the nearest wall and felt it answer the way skin answers skin, quietly, certainly. The guide stood a step behind, as he had from the first, as if escorting not a traveler to a destination, but a truth to its home. Neither spoke. What needed speaking had already become air. He descended by a narrow stair that curved like a thought changing its mind. Streets welcomed him without ceremony. Windows held the light the way eyes hold recognition. He walked past the lantern tree and saw one dim lamp quiver, remembering his vow. He did not touch it. Consent is sometimes a hand. Sometimes it is the patience to let a hand arrive. A child crossed his path, and he paused. Not a child of bone and breath, but the first small presence he had met in the desert, the one with keys. She sat on a low step, legs swinging, a quiet lilt in her posture that said she had all the time in the world. The same strange ring of keys rested in her lap, though they no longer clinked. They shone as if newly woken. "You kept yours," she said, matter of fact. He nodded. "It kept me." She considered that, then held up a key of clear glass that caught the city and folded it into itself. "People think keys are for doors," she mused, as if to herself. "Sometimes they are for eyes." She placed the glass key back on her lap and gave him a look that was not approval and not test, just attention, pure as water. He thought of all the ways the world uses attention to grasp, to possess. This attention did neither. It simply stayed. "Thank you," he said, without knowing for which of 100 reasons he meant it. She smiled the way windows smile when morning finally reaches them. "Keep walking." He did. A corridor opened, long and simple, and at its end was a room the size of an ordinary day. No towers, no arches, no river blazing with memory. Only a table, a chair, a basin, a door. He understood at once. This, too, was the heart of the city, perhaps more than any other place. The room asked for nothing grand. It asked for presence. He sat. On the table lay a loaf of bread, uncut, a knife beside it. His hands remembered what the mind does not need to rehearse. He sliced and set half aside without thinking whom it would feed. The act itself was an answer. He waited. No one came, or perhaps everyone did, because when he lifted the piece to his mouth, he felt not fullness but belonging, and belonging never eats alone. He chewed slowly. He tasted not sweetness, not spice, only the truth of nourishment. Enough. He listened for the bell call out of habit, then smiled at himself. There was no need to be called to where one already stands. The call had become quiet, the way rivers become quiet when you stand inside them. On the far wall hung a mirror, so ordinary he hadn't noticed it. Not tall, not gilded, not inscribed. He rose and faced it. No visions came, only his face, as steady as the water in the square, as ordinary as every hour that does not announce itself and still builds the world. He lifted a hand as if to test whether the surface would turn to water and let him pass. It did not. It offered him himself, which was passage enough. He turned, reached for the door, and found no handle. He laughed softly, old reflex. He pressed the key to the wood and then, catching himself, did nothing. The grain under his fingertips felt like a heartbeat made visible. He stepped back, nodded to the door as to a friend, and the door opened of its own accord. Not because he had unlocked it, but because he no longer needed to. Beyond lay not ceremony but street, not proclamation but life. The city met him with the calm of things that will not fade, because they were never pretending to be more than they are. The guide joined him there, and for the first time since the desert, they spoke as walkers do when words carry no weight beyond their saying. "Where do I go now?" the traveler asked, though he already knew. "Where you always go," the guide said. "To the next breath, to the next choice, to the next small act that builds a room for someone else to breathe in. And if I forget, you will, and you will remember. The key is not for not forgetting. It is for returning." They came to the boundary where the city's stones meet what had once been sand. The desert was still faintly visible, like writing someone had gently tried to erase, but chose instead to leave as context. The horizon, which had once been a rule, had become a permission. "Look," the guide said, "not back. Through." He did. And looking through, he saw what the desert had been teaching all along. Not emptiness, but room. Not silence, but listening. Not abandonment, but invitation. He saw the line of his first steps like a thread that had been waiting for his hand. He saw how each refusal to speak had taught him to listen, and how each surrender to truth had mended what pride had torn. "Every choice is architecture," he said, not to recall a lesson, but to greet a friend. The sentence took its place among the others, truth and transparency, shadow and light, like stones set shoulder to shoulder in a wall that lets sunlight through. The guide placed a hand over his heart and withdrew it empty. The key had remained where it now belonged. "You are ready," he said. "For what?" "For the ordinary," the guide answered and smiled. "It is the last secret." They walked until the guide's presence became indistinguishable from the cities, and the cities from his own. At a modest corner, where one street widens to let laughter pass and another narrows to hold a whispered grief, the guide stopped. "I will not say goodbye," he said. "There is nowhere to go from here that is not here." "Then I will say thank you," the traveler answered. "Say it forward," the guide replied. "That is where thanks belongs." The traveler nodded. He knew how. He had been practicing without knowing all his life. He crossed a small bridge that spanned only a gutter of water and felt it hum like the Great One had. He paused under a window where someone had set a cup to cool and felt the cup's ordinary presence as sacrament. He passed a doorway and knew, without proof, that on its other side someone had just decided to forgive. The city carried these truths the way a body carries breath, quietly, unfailingly. And now, yes now, the narrator's voice thinned to the intimacy of sitting beside you. No distance, no height, only the closeness of a chair drawn near. If you lift your eyes, you may see it, the way your own streets are already opening. Perhaps a lantern you thought too dim will flicker when you attend to it without scorn. Perhaps a door you have pushed too long will open when you stop proving and start consenting. Perhaps a garden you called ruined is waiting not for triumph, but for tears. Attention is the simplest key. Given without grasping, it becomes a lamp that does not burn out. Offered without demand, it is love in its most exact form. Turn it toward what you fear, and fear will teach you where to build. Turn it toward what you love, and love will show you how. And if you ask, as we all do, where is the eternal? Listen gently. It answers by becoming small, in how you greet a name, in whether you keep a promise no one is tallying, in the quiet you choose when truth is heavy, in the word you speak when silence would be easier and wrong. Brick by invisible brick, breath by uncounted breath. The traveler reached once more the edge that was no edge, the horizon that no longer needed to divide. He did not raise his hand in oath or triumph. He placed it lightly against his chest and felt there the city's answer. He looked, not back, not ahead, but inward, and saw the desert dissolve into a distance without threat. He saw the child with keys and the old man who could see without eyes. The rivers and arches, the sealed house opened, the mirror that made and unmade him. The tree in the garden of shadows now heavy with birds that knew his name without letters. None of it was gone. All of it was gathered. He breathed, and somewhere a lantern brightened. He stepped, and somewhere a bridge steadied. He listened, and somewhere a door remembered how to be a door. And perhaps the voice beside you says one last time, as you listen now, you are walking your own city, brick by brick, breath by breath. If so, go on. The horizon is not an end. It is a generosity. The call is not a summons. It is your own consent. Carry your key. Use it less to open and more to see. Tend your gardens. Cross your bridges. Accept your shadow. Tell the truth gently. Give the small gifts that last. When you do, you will find what he found, that the city is not a place you arrive at, but a way you walk. And the desert, when you meet it again, as all do, will not be exile. It will be room to hear your heart calling you home.